This is Lee back once again for another video, and this is going to be my spoilerific review slash rant about Star Wars Episode 8, Disney's The Last Jedi, in theaters now. Not a paid shill or sponsor. I saw the movie not too long ago. I think it let out about an hour ago. Let's see if I have my ticket stub here somewhere. I think I might have thrown it away, but here's the receipt anyway. You can see that. Waste of $8 of your American currency. My honest opinion was it was not a good movie, not a good Star Wars movie. I did watch a few reviews, not trying to taint my opinion by any means, non-spoiler. All the people who said that this was bad, disappointing, letdown, betrayal of the series, were right. Everyone who said that this was their favorite Star Wars, well, who am I to judge? It's your favorite. But I imagine you haven't seen any other Star Wars movies, or maybe you didn't care for the originals. Maybe you just like things that are new. This, to me, was a failure. A big budget failure. I'll give them some credit for trying to do some things new. It was much more trying to do new things than The Force Awakens, but, well, I'll get more into detail as things go. It's gotta calm down a little bit. I know I sound a little bit out of breath. My voice isn't quite what it needs to be. I've been getting over one of your, the smallest things that God in His wisdom placed upon your earth. But, I'm, my earth-based, immune system is conquering, and I'm getting better. I appreciate comedy films that you, create on your earth and share in your culture, and I appreciate Star Wars. One of the most of all, just because, they are comedy films, but, there are moments of truth, moments of realism within them. They make them enduring. Likable characters, fun, swashbuckling storylines, little moments of humor. Not just slapstick, but, good humor. Banter between characters, but, a good message, some kind of moral tales behind it. Like good fairy stories, fairy tales from your past. That's what George Lucas claimed he was trying to do. Besides just recreating, the, kind of Saturday morning matinee serials, whatever, not breakfast cereals, from his childhood, and the fairy stories he enjoyed, Buck Rogers and all that. But The Last Jedi, it's a failure, and I'll tell you why. I'm not going to go through the whole, well, this is a spoiler review, okay? And, we in the Star Wars fan community love spoilers, so I'll get out all the spoilers. Okay, Luke Skywalker dies, alright? Dumbledore dies, well, just kidding, he's not in the film. Leia doesn't die, even though Carrie Fisher is deceased, sadly. Admiral Akbar dies, we see him for 1 second and he's dead. Grand Master Snoke dies, which I'm glad of, he was a stupid character. Let's see, who else? I think that was about it. But anyway, so got all that silliness out of the way. The thing is, though, nobody cares. Nobody cares. I mean, these are, well-liked, beloved characters, or beloved extras, whatever you want to say, but there was just no feeling at all behind it in the film at all. I said that already. Just imagine, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm just going to compare this to the other movies, so I'm going to save all that time. Characters died in the early, the original films and the prequels. Characters that we've just been introduced to, and the other characters, they kind of mourn for a second, and then they're back and having fun and swashbuckling adventures. But, and yet, when they do show emotion, we kind of believe them. We believe that Luke really missed Obi-Wan, but he had no time for sorrows, and he had to move on. And Obi-Wan came back anyway. It's going to be all over the place, but let me just say, The Last Jedi is worse than The Force Awakens. it's worse. And see, the thing is, most of the criticism directed at The Force Awakens was that it was a remake. It felt very strongly like a remake of Episode 4, New Hope, the original Star Wars from 1977, with some moments from Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi shoehorned in. It was all fan service. It was like one cool thing, Kylo Ren stopping a blaster bolt in midair. The rest of it was silly. Everything good about that film was a copy of, one of the original trilogies. And, you had the whiny, sulking Anakin Skywalker reborn as Kylo Ren. I shared my theory about how The Force Awakens is more enjoyable if you imagine it as three young people who get warped into the world of Star Wars. They have a Narnia-style adventure where they kind of try to pick up where the old characters left off. But really, I see Disney Star Wars as kind of its own thing. It's weird because it doesn't make any sense, and there's no desire to see it if you don't already have the George Lucas Star Wars in the background. But it feels like such a betrayal, such a retread, such a boring waste of what's already come before. Kind of like fan films that are kind of badly done. It's one person's vision of what Star Wars is all about, but it's more than just showing us the old stuff over and over again, just kind of dressed up with new CGI. But The Last Jedi, tries to be a little more different, and I give them credit for that. I criticize the prequels because, they were just uneven. There were parts that were really cringe-worthy, really annoying, Jar Jar Binks, an overly long, pod race, a really boring political talk, things like that, kind of goofy CGI scenes. But then you had really cool action sequences, well choreographed fights, and people said, oh, it looks like a dance, but there were cool moves. The fights went on for a while. There was real tension in the air. There was real drama. You didn't know what was going to happen because, oh yeah, some of these characters, they've got to survive, but anything can happen. It was cool. We wanted to see it. It wasn't just like, well, that character looks cool, so I want to buy the action figure, but he's silly, stupid. Think of Captain Phasma in these new films. Captain Phasma is a shiny stormtrooper with chrome-plated armor, and she wears a cape. I say she. I don't think you really know that she's female, except from, the behind-the-scenes interviews and things. Just kind of an asexual, character. But she looks cool, but doesn't do anything cool. Not a threat at all. And if you saw the trailers for The Force Awakens, you got this impression of this is a really cool saga beginning, but it was kind of a letdown. It was just a remake of, a big-budget fan film. And then The Last Jedi, the trailers make it seem like, oh my gosh, this is a dark, brooding, iconoclastic, triumph of a film movie. But in reality, The Last Jedi is rather pathetic. People kept talking about dark. This is going to be so dark, gritty, dark. PG-13, gritty. Rogue One was gritty compared to this. Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3 was gritty. This isn't gritty. I'd say this is, there's a lot more, like, goofy banter, jokes, funny moments, cringe-worthy moments, pimps at cuteness, these little cute little creatures. And Rogue One was much darker. So if that's your thing, if that's your judge of a good Star Wars movie, just watch Rogue One again. Rogue One started out very boring. This movie had a long stretch of boring. I'd say the beginning was quite boring as well. It just felt like just very uneven. All the good parts of The Last Jedi felt like they were copied from, well, mostly from Empire Strikes Back, but some from Return of the Jedi. And then there were some things that are just goofy. Poe Dameron, this guy who didn't have much of a part in the Force Awakens, now he's the greatest pilot in history. And nobody cares. Everyone treats him like garbage. He dresses like Han Solo. And, his acting isn't great, but... So, the First Order, which is so silly, it's just the Empire, come on, but with goofier people in charge, younger, goofier people in charge, and a CGI character that looks like Gollum with, uglier face, I guess, is in charge, and he's the supreme leader. He's the emperor, a wannabe emperor. You know, the guy who directed or who wrote or co-produced or whatever, whoever that guy is that gave us Rogue one of the guys in charge, he said, oh, the First Order of the Empire is a white supremacist organization. Human organization. Okay, so let's get this straight. So, The Last Jedi portrays legions of Asian people, humans, in the Imperial, hierarchy, if you will. So they're not white supremacist. And he says, oh, they're a human organization, but yet the public face is an alien, a person from another world. In context, say, well, maybe Snoke is human. He's humanoid, but, he's got these long, like, claw-like arms. He looks more like Yoda than he does, a Earth person. I mean, who am I to judge, but still. So, whatever that was, that defense of the Empire, and how they're portrayed, obviously has been thrown to the wind. Whatever, I don't care. I don't care if half of the, diversified in terms of race, ethnic origin, gender, people from different worlds. I don't care. It's not a political mouthpiece. But you're supposed to be telling a story. The politics can be very dated at this rate. So, anyway. So, there were a few cool moments in The Last Jedi. So, there was a moment when Kylo Ren tries to kill Luke Skywalker. Fire all their lasers from all of their Imperial walkers. They got the AT-ATs, hats, whatever you want to call them, but they've got big, like, gorilla knuckles for some reason. And they all fire on him. And, of course, they're on this, pie crust planet where there's, like, a red goo underneath a white sand. And, of course, instantly it's like a bloody splash. But, of course, it's just the juice under the surface of the planet. And they're shooting him for, 10 seconds or something of concentrated fire. Because we know from the prequels that one blaster shot can kill a Jedi, and you just have to catch him by surprise. So, obviously, Luke is dead at that point. And I thought, well, he's going to emerge from the wreckage, and it's going to be a hologram. Well, I was almost right. He was using the Force to appear somewhere else, and, you think he's going to have a saber duel with Kylo Ren. I thought, well, anything can happen. They could just say, Kylo Ren is a terrible fighter. He's absolutely horrible. In The Force Awakens, you saw he was beaten by, a stormtrooper who had a little bit of training with a melee weapon. He was beaten by another stormtrooper. But, he did pretty well. And he was bested by a young woman, who had picked up a lightsaber pretty much for the first time. So, he's never going to beat Luke Skywalker. But Luke Skywalker was using the Force to put himself there, and so it was just a big tease. So that was kind of cool. The best scenes of the movie were when Luke is training Rey. Rey looks like she's filled out a little bit. She looked kind of scrawny in the first movie, and it looks like she's filled out. Or maybe it's just the way the camera's shot, but it looked like she was like 10, 20 pounds heavier. Same thing with Finn. Everybody looked like they'd gained weight, which is fine. I'm not saying they need to be scrawny, like 70s scrawny, but just weird camera shots. Other reviewers have said, and I have my own opinions, but, the best scenes, the best acting in The Last Jedi was with the old actors. Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, Carrie Fisher, the late Carrie Fisher, as Princess Leia. Han Solo was killed off in a silly fashion in The Force Awakens, so he wasn't there. Chewbacca, every time I saw him, he looked like CGI. I assume it's just a mask, but it just looked fake. It looked like he wasn't in the scene. Compare his scenes in The Last Jedi or The Force Awakens to Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi or the original Star Wars. He just doesn't look like he's really in the scene. So I'm guessing they must have enhanced or put filters on him. these stupid little Furby creatures. They were very silly and unnecessary. You could have cut them out of the movie. It's just, a 1 second joke about Chewbacca. He's about to eat, one that he cooked, and they were like, making noises. And he just, brings them all on the ship, I guess. Very little character development for Chewbacca, but just silly. Whatever. BB-8, a soccer ball with a fire, smoke detector on top. R2-D2 was a little more interesting. BB-8 wasn't quite as annoying. He got destroyed a few times, but he just kind of went back together. There was a silly casino planet that looked like straight out of Earth, which is fine, but it was very pointless. It felt like, okay, so, we don't really have a message in this movie, so, I don't know, maybe let's do class warfare. Okay, so there are these rich gamblers. Up to now, the gamblers are kind of the good guys, Han Solo and Lando Calrissian, these kind of gambler types. They're kind of rough around the edges, but they're, got a heart of gold, got humanity. These are just kind of cardboard, bad rich guys with white gloves and monocles. And, they're exploiting these poor, little floppy-eared, cartoon racehorse animals. And, this short little woman who's like an engineer, a miner, something. She, has a crush on Finn, and she's like, oh, well, I wish I could just punch a hole through this, beautiful city because they exploited, these poor animals and exploited the people, and, so they end up trashing the whole casino, and so it's a little bit of, fight for the little guy, class warfare, but it's just completely incidental to the plot. It's nothing to do with, the rebellion never did anything about it. The Republic never did anything. So it's like they sold weapons to the Resistance and the First Order. Okay. But then it's just, it's kind of over. You could cut out that entire scene and everything would have been fine. And, you see these little kids who are like stable hands, looking up at the sky. And at the very end, there's a kid with like a broom in his hand. And he's like standing there like Luke Skywalker looking up at the stars. Like, oh, the next generation of Star Wars fans, anyone can be a Jedi, yay. It was silly, it was sentimental. I'm not saying that you can't have that in your film, but it was just silly, it was so forced. And what else was there? Let's see. Oh yes, of course, running from the First Order. The First Order is a failure. They're terrible. How did they get so far? It doesn't make much sense. I'm gonna keep comparing everything back to the original films. Because really, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and even Return of the Jedi, that, everyone, badmouths, they still hold up today. Whether you're watching the originals or the mangled special editions, the characters are likable, the plot makes sense, even though, of course, there's plot holes and problems. There's a little bit of cringeworthy dialogue, there's some slapstick. There's a comment about laser brain in Empire Strikes Back, and Luke's acting is kind of bad at the beginning of the original Star Wars, but really, the Ewoks are silly, but really, they just stand head and shoulders above something like this Last Jedi. You get some tender moments between Luke and Leia, but, and, oh, yeah, one other thing people have said is, well, the Force doesn't work the same way in this movie as it does in the others. I disagree with that point. Previously, it was established that people can talk to each other across distances through the Force. Vader and Luke did it in Empire Strikes Back, and Leia and Luke did it also. Obi-Wan could talk to Luke from distance, through the Force after his death, at least. In the prequels, you had people meditating and sensing each other. Now, in the Force, not the Force Awakens, but the Last Jedi, I'm getting them confused. No, in the Last Jedi, people can have physical form. They can bilocate, I guess. So, two people could be in separate planets, and through the Force, they could just kind of like both appear in the same room and kind of touch each other and like tap each other and stuff. Well, and then, Yoda appears as a Force ghost, whatever you want to call it, Jedi spirit, and it's the Yoda from Empire Strikes Back. They did a great job, except his face looks a little CGI, a little fat, bloated. Didn't quite look like a puppet, but they got the voice right, they got the mannerisms right. It was not the CGI Yoda from the prequels at all, so nice job with that. But, Yoda can use the Force to affect the physical world. He can physically touch Luke. But, you had Obi-Wan spirit, in Return of the Jedi sitting on a log. He's interacting with matter, whatever. And in the early scripts for Return of the Jedi, you did have the Jedi coming back in physical form to actually fight battles and things. So it's not that far-fetched. Again, Disney's just drawing on what's already been done. They really don't have much, except they made it so that Luke just kind of like fades away just on his own. He kind of looks up at the sky. He looks at the sun, and then he just kind of turns into and staring at the sun can damage your eyesight, but it doesn't kill you. But, it was never really explained in the original Star Wars. What happened to Obi-Wan? Vader swings his lightsaber at him because he's holding his blade up in the air, and his cloak just kind of falls down without him in it. So, the question is, was he cut in half by the lightsaber, and as he was dying, he just gave up, his spirit, and so his body just instantly disintegrated? What happened? So if we're, believing that, I guess the Jedi can just disappear out of their body at any time they want to. And I guess they can come back anytime they want to. So in the next movie, I wouldn't be surprised if they bring Luke back that way in physical form. He can fight battles. He can do whatever he wants. The only thing that they did in Return of the Jedi was that, Obi-Wan said, well, I can't interfere. Your destiny's a certain path. Which, whatever, it's never explained. It's just there are certain things he's limited to, perhaps by God. Yes, God exists in the Star Wars universe, which is fine. Jar Jar Binks talked about gods in Episode 1, whatever. Maybe some people have speculated, well, in the Star Wars universe, there is no God, there's only the Force, and all these religions are kind of primitive attempts to explain the supernatural, but, the Jedi have science, they have midi-chlorians, and, whatever. But it seems very, quasi-mystical. Who knows, whatever. George Lucas had his own ideas about what the Force was supposed to be, metaphor for faith, spirituality, the unknown, whatever. And Disney does whatever they want with. They don't care about what George Lucas originally came up with. They just scramble through his notes for ideas and then do what they want. But several characters mention God, Godspeed. So they still believe in a supreme being, a deity. There was this, I believe it was the woman from Jurassic Park. She played a purple-haired admiral in the Resistance. I don't know why they don't call it the Rebel Alliance or the New Republic or whatever. It was just very silly. But, I always wondered why the New Order became so powerful. The Empire in the original movies was a credible threat. You really believed that they'd come to power, and they held on to that power for at least a considerable amount of time. You think of Nazi Germany. They came to power kind of overnight, and they were a credible threat to the world. Not for 1,000 years like they claimed, but, a good decade. A little over a decade. The Empire in the Star Wars universe came to power in the prequel trilogy. They explained, and they'd been around for at least 3 decades. 2 decades before, in between, and then almost a decade through the original trilogy. And then it would make sense that they were still around, but we're supposed to believe, I guess, that the Empire completely collapsed and then was completely built all the way up again into the First Order. They were able to build, a stronger Death Star, and they had a stronger Emperor who came out of nowhere. And yet they're buffoons. They're easily beaten. Grandmaster Snoke is pathetic. And they had a scene where, who cares? It's a spoiler, but he's standing there making goofy, he's saying, "Oh, I can see the future. I see Kylo Ren, picking up his lightsaber, turning it on, and killing his true enemy." And you just see the lightsaber that's on his desk, on his armchair there next to him, turning towards him, while Kylo Ren is standing there, kind of like, "Yep, I'm gonna betray him. I saw it, coming a mile away." And Rey is on her knees there, and it's like, "Oh yes, kill her, my apprentice." And he just, the lightsaber like cuts through Snoke and kills him, and he falls down. Later, there's a scene where it just kind of shows his head, with his tongue hanging out and his eyes like cross-eyed. His body's laying there in all these different pieces, and he's CGI, so whatever, doesn't matter. And people in the audience actually laughed. It was funny. And Grandmaster Hux, I think is his name, this extremely pale, the Scottish red-haired, over-the-top, hammy actor. He's definitely not a Grand Moff Tarkin. He's not a Captain Needa. He's not a Admiral Ozzel. He's not any of these Imperials that we've seen before. He's not Moff Jared or Gerard, or however you say his name from, Return of the Jedi. He's none of these guys. He's just kind of like a kid. He's another kid who was sucked into the Star Wars universe and said, "Oh, I want to be an Imperial. I want to shout orders at people and, act all, stuffy and militaristic." Yeah, that's the thing. This guy is not a Nazi. He's a neo-Nazi. He's a goofball who wanted to be part of a movement, and so he put on a uniform and started saluting and goose-stepping around. He's not, some seasoned politician or, veteran military man who has, real ability to manipulate people and, win battles. He's ridiculous. And Kylo Ren throws him around. Kylo Ren is a goofball as well. These guys are cartoon villains. It's Skeletor and Beastman from Master of the Universe in the cartoon. Occasionally they'll kill someone and like, hee, I killed someone. But the rest of the time they're just, laughable. They're video game villains from an E for Everyone game. Really, and there's some really bad dialogue in this movie. Finn is comic relief. People said that. Yeah, he kind of is. He has a battle with Captain Phasma, but it's super short. It's like Jeff Hardy versus Sting, Victory Road short. It's just a couple of good hits, and then he defeats her, and it's like, thank goodness, another pathetic villain eliminated. So, really, The Last Jedi, to me, felt like Disney was like, okay, we made $2 billion from The Force Awakens. This was perfect. Now let's wipe the slate clean. We'll get rid of everything that we put in the first movie and start all over again. This is even worse than the drastic change that George Lucas did after the criticism of Episode 1. Episode 1, Phantom Menace, when it came out, it was the highest grossing Star Wars movie of all time. And yet, the fans bashed it and said it was terrible. And they had some legit criticisms. It wasn't just Jar Jar Binks. There was a lot of problems, but, Episode 1 still had a lot going for it. It still had kind of a swashbuckling feel. It still had a sense of size and scope. It still, had a sense of discovery. Interesting characters, likable characters, cool action scenes. Yes, it had Jar Jar Binks and some silly slapstick. It had some boring politics. And it had some dated CGI. So it definitely has problems. Yes, and Mr. Plinkett in his long review, kudos, whatever, you said some good things in between. Making bad jokes about pizza rolls. I started getting hungry for pizza rolls by the end of that, so kudos. Mr. Cranky, I was thinking of making a reference to him too, thinking about, leaving the theater. I thought someone behind me said, "Good movie," and I looked over, and actually what he said was "Goob Moobly," and he was wearing a propeller beanie and a giant diaper. So, what was I to expect? The Last Jedi was not good. So, you can, if you're a Star Wars fan, you can skip this movie. Star Wars may be your religion, you may be part of the cult of Star Wars fanboyism, but there's really no reason to see this film. There's no new revelations. Basically, all they're telling you is, hey, remember The Force Awakens? Doesn't matter. All you need to know is, hey, Rey is a Jedi. Finn is a guy who's got a love interest now. She's probably going to survive. And he's comic relief sidekick, number one. And Poe Dameron is the greatest pilot in history. He's a video game player. He can go against a super star destroyer, which they call a Dreadnought, which is like an Eclipse-class star destroyer from the expanded universe. With but it's got two big red cannons. It can, decimate a planet, but not like a, Death Star laser. He can just fly in there and destroy all the cannons by himself. So he's a better pilot than Luke. He's a better pilot than Anakin. He's a better pilot than Kylo Ren, who can do spinning. That's a good trick. Everybody who's good spins. But it's just silly. This movie's a waste of time. You'd have more fun playing the video games. You'd have more fun watching the prequels, which had better action scenes. The fight choreography was terrible. There's a scene in this movie after Snoke gets cut in half. Snoke, okay, he is, his big hologram face, he's talking to Hux, and he kind of like throws him on the ground and spins him around with the Force. And he zaps somebody with lightning to the ground. I think it was Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren smashes his mask. I'll rant about masks in a second. But, and he throws Rey around with the Force, teleports her around the room. His throne room is so silly looking. It's just like a red, glowy background and like a big magnifying glass that looks out the window, and then a bunch of guys with like red lobster armor. They're supposed to be like the royal guards, but if you've ever seen that red plastic armor that like martial arts people use for training, I think I don't know what it's called, but it's just a bunch of plastic, goofy looking armor, and it's just so that one guy can wear it and the other person can practice their punches and kicks without actually hurting the person that's inside. Well, these guys have that on, and then like a cloak over it, and then they have these like bladed weapons. But they have like little like red energy on the edges, so there's a guy with like a baton that has two blades, which is straight from Crimson Empire, the expanded universe. There's another guy that has like a light whip. Well, it's really just like a chain on a handle, but it's, each little segment is like lit up, like but he can balance it on his own arm. It doesn't cut through. So whatever, and of course it makes the sound effects similar to what the Magna Guards had in Episode 3. This is all geeky stuff, I know. But you got a whole bunch of these guards with these weapons, and after Snoke gets killed, they all try to kill Rey and Kylo Ren, who band together, and they have this very awkward fight scene, like they're really trying hard. They never use the Force to beat these guys. They just hack them with lightsabers. So, do these guys have the Force? Apparently they're just ordinary people in armor. I'm sure there's some book explaining, what it's all about, but they're chumps. And yet these two supposedly most powerful Jedi and Sith, I guess. We never find out who the Knights of Ren really are, except some of Luke's failed students that all decide to kill everyone. These two guys, these two people have a really hard time fighting them. It's kind of like Disney went back and said, well, the very first lightsaber fight that we see in the original Star Wars is kind of clunky, kind of awkward, not a lot of moves, and so let's just do that for every fight scene. They're going to be short, clunky, awkward. The choreography is just not good. You can say what you want about the choreography not being believable in the prequels, but at least it looks cool. It's like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Compared to this looks like some fanboys just swinging some plastic lightsabers around, and eventually, like, these two kids, eventually beat you down. So, it was pretty underwhelming. The very best scenes of The Last Jedi definitely have to be the scenes with the original actors, not just because they're original actors, just because they're better at conveying emotion, delivering silly lines with feeling and conviction, and just having a presence. And, the scenes of the training are just very, very similar. There's so many callbacks to The Empire Strikes Back. So, really, you just have a whole bunch of nothing. And I can go on and on about The Last Jedi. I realize I'm not doing, the classic thing of the big synopsis, where you tell every detail of the movie again and again. And then this is the part, where you say, I, as a fan, am no longer a fan, and Star Wars is dead to me, and Disney can take a flying, I'm not going to do that. See, I'm a Star Wars fan, but I know that I can just, at any time, pop in the original trilogy and enjoy it in high definition. It's fine. I don't need the special editions. I don't need the expanded universe, although some of the video games I enjoyed. And it's funny how they, they crap all over the expanded universe and then they crib it for ideas in the movies. Go figure. Lucas did that, a little bit of that himself. I have the prequels. The prequels were better than this. The Force Awakens is a remake, a fan film, and The Last Jedi is just a big waste of time. Rogue One is, still better than both of the new trilogy films, and really I don't care what they do in the next one. My expectations were low going into The Last Jedi, and I was spoiler-free. All I watched was the trailer. And I did watch a couple of reviews, I listened rather, spoiler-free reviews, and pretty much everything they said was correct, except about the Force. I mean, the Force, it was just a little bit more outgrowth of what we've already seen in the previous 6 films. But The Last Jedi is a waste. There's no good action scenes. The best we get is some video game-esque stuff. Oh, I forgot to say, yeah, so Star Wars isn't dead to me. Just The Last Jedi is just a waste of time. And I have no faith in them for the next one at all. I kind of held my tongue a little bit with The Force Awakens. I thought they can't possibly screw up the next one. But they did. Even though they tried something new. So, the opening space battle of The Last Jedi has these bombers. They're these really fat ships that remind me of a cross between, Boba Fett's Slave One ship, Jango Fett's had the same ship, and the B-Wings from Return of the Jedi. It's kind of like a top piece and a bottom piece and the little cockpit at the top. But the bottom is really fat, and they move very, very slowly in this very tight formation. And they just have all these like little glowy, little balls with blinky lights in the bottom, and they're bombs. So I guess they have to fly right on top of a ship, like right above it, and drop, because there's no gravity in space, but they drop the bombs in a cluster, not, they don't fly around or anything, in a cluster, and then it blows up the ship. It seems like a very stupid technology. When you say, well, it's science fiction-ly, anything can happen. There's its own logic. There's no attempt to explain the logic of why they use these stupid ships. And someone else commented that, there's a little tiny remote control inside that the person has to punch the button to release the bombs. Why that? Why not just, a lever or something in the cockpit, a button? We'll give the order and it just does it. And also that you can have a scene with, this poor little worker, and she's laying there and she has to kind of like kick it and get the little handheld device that the pilot was killed and he dropped it, I guess. And she has to get it to fall, and then she grabs it and hits the button, and it's like, okay, so you've got a kamikaze pilot. And actually throughout the film, there's a lot of kamikaze moments. And, at first they have Asian actors doing it. It's like, come on. So this is a callback to World War II and the kamikaze pilots. The Japanese, they sent these young men, and I'm not sure whether some women as well, but they basically brainwashed them to say, kill yourself for the Emperor. Load your plane with bombs and just ram it into the Allied ships. And, they were pretty successful, the ones that hit, but of course they committed suicide, and they were brainwashed into thinking, like, with these Al-Qaeda types, you'll have a glorious afterlife because you're not really killing yourself, you're a martyr for the greater cause, you're godly emperor or whatever. But, and you have a, so those bombers were so stupid. We know Star Wars has better technology than that. They have guided missiles. The other thing is, why would you need to kill yourself? to take out the enemy in Star Wars. We have droids that can pilot ships. We have remote-controlled ships. All they'd have to do is just make the bombers just crash right into the big ships and blow them up. Or, fire the bombs like missiles. Oh, well, they'll be shot down. Well, it'd be a lot harder to shoot down those individual bombs than to just have these very slow-moving ships in tight formation, slowly going over above the big ship and dropping a cluster of bombs straight down, with the crew inside to get killed. Seems silly. And then there was another scene later on where the purple-haired, Admiral, she is in an escape pod, which for some reason has a hyperdrive, and she rams it into the head ship, and it cuts like a big jagged like swath. It like cuts the ship in half. Okay, so if escape pods could always do that, how come no one ever tried that before? It's like, oh, well, let's have a bunch of suicide pilots just like crash into the capital ships with little tiny escape pods, and we'll destroy everything. Of course, in the old movies, they actually needed precise calculations. The nav computer and the Millennium Falcon, they couldn't just jump to hyperspace whenever they wanted to. They had to get the calculations. It took a little while, and then they did it. In 30 years, the technology is so great that you can just punch the hyperdrive whenever you want to. But then you run out of fuel. They made the big thing about, oh, they're going to run out of fuel. Fuel was never a problem in the old movies. They never even mentioned it. We never even knew what they used. I mean, there was little hoses on the X-Wings, but... oh my gosh, we're going to run out of fuel. Fuel! Can we get more fuel? Where's the fuel? It was just silly. And why would you need suicide ships anyway? Because you don't have to have a human actually at the controls to pilot it. Can't you do it remotely? Oh, you know what? There's a fleet coming. Okay, we've got 1,000 escape pods. Rather than abandoning ship and getting killed ourselves, just set them all on autopilot to crash into the fleet at hyperspace. Okay. We took out their whole fleet. Yay. So it's silly. So, you have these things in the movie, but if you think about them for 2 seconds, you realize how dumb, how stupid they are. The team that put this movie together, they just didn't think about it. They didn't treat the mythos with the respect it deserves. They just kind of wanted to swerve the audience, that's it. And yes, George Lucas did the same thing. He wanted to swerve us by coming up with new things and creating continuity errors left and right. But yes, they were continuity errors, but at least, basically they made Obi-Wan into a liar or an idiot, and they made Yoda into a coward, but Luke Skywalker, it still doesn't make sense why he would abandon the entire galaxy. This is the man that, he was so idealistic. He would bring back Darth Vader. If there was just a tiny chance that he could be saved, everyone else wanted him dead. But Luke risked everything. He went against everyone on his own will. How he could be fooled so easily. And Kylo Ren, what? He betrays the Jedi, and it's like, well, I sense the darkness in him, so I thought, maybe I should kill Kylo Ren. But I kind of regretted, having that thought and then pulling out my lightsaber and holding it over him while he was sleeping. And then Kylo Ren, defeated me and killed everyone. There's flashbacks in The Force Awakens. There's those same flashbacks retold in The Last Jedi, but they're different. They're modified. So different things happened. So who's telling the truth? Who knows? But I feel like the people making this movie don't really care about what they previously established. They don't care what has been previously established in other movies. And so we're supposed to think that this is the successor, the next chapter, an ongoing saga. But really, they're making it up as they go along. And they're heavily into fan service, heavily into promoting merchandise without substance. Why did you want a Boba Fett doll? Was it just because he looked cool? Or he was mysterious? Was it because he actually seemed like he was powerful? At least at one time. I think the latter. Certain characters, Darth Vader's just a guy in a helmet. But why was he cool? Because he was powerful, he was strong, he was a threat. He wasn't just because if you take all that away, I think it looks hokey. A guy in a black cape Ooh, are they trying to be Dracula or something? Why does he have a bucket helmet on his head? Oh, his voice is deep. So what? You know, and they kind of make fun of Kylo Ren. It's like, take that stupid helmet off. You know, whatever. He takes it off. But here's the thing. Kylo Ren should have kept that helmet on the whole time. You know, imagine if I took my mask off in my very first video. What good would it do? You know, there'd be no drama, no build-up, no suspense. You know, if I ever take this mask off, it's going to be a big reveal, right? But it doesn't even make sense. It's just like, I'm an actor, and I want you to see my face as much as possible. That's my meal ticket. If you're going to wear a mask, you know, be like Hugo Weaving in V for Vendetta. Just wear that mask with pride. Be the character. Let your voice and your body do the acting for you. Don't be so vain. Besides, you know, it's not like the actor's face is that expressive. It's mostly just a blank expression most of the time anyway. So, yeah. So this movie is just, you know, it's just all over the place, but it has so much bad in it. Bad acting, bad fight choreography. The CGI is, you know, pretty good, except when it's bringing something back that we're supposed to remember, like Yoda. You know, his face looks a little too pudgy and glassy. It doesn't look quite right. The sound was a little bad in the theater, but I blame that on the settings. Some other people have complained about the sound, you know, being a little crackly or whatever. And the screen had little specks on it, but it wasn't, you know, an old screen. It was a cheap theater. Whatever. I didn't watch it in 3D, but who cares about that? 3D can't make a bad movie good. And it can't make a good movie bad. It's just a little thing. So, I would say if I watch, you know, The Last Jedi, you know, 20 more times, which I won't, and I'm sure there's people out there, you know, it'll probably make $2 billion. It'll probably make more than any Star Wars movie ever made. And people say it's the best movie of all time. They'll say it's the best Star Wars movie. They'll say they saw it, you know, 100 times in the theater. But I think those people are crazy. I mean, maybe they're paid shills. Maybe they're just fanatics. But really, I mean, there's so much more, so much better in Star Wars. They can do a lot of great things with CG, but some things just don't look quite real. You can tell Yoda's face is CGI'd. You can tell Chewbacca's face is CGI'd. I don't care if they've got a costume. I don't care what they do. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look real. It doesn't look like it's really in the scene. The enhancement is unnecessary. It looks goofy. It looks strange. I mean, Chewbacca looked real enough in the old movies. Why? You know, fix something that's not broken. You know, everybody thought Leia was going to die in this movie because the trailers all made it look like she gets killed. You know, Kylo Ren holds off from shooting her at the last second, but his men shoot her anyway, and her cockpit gets blown up. Admiral Akbar dies off camera, and then she floating out in space, her body, and it's a CGI body, and she kind of like uses the Force to like pull herself back into the cockpit. Then she's on life support, and you know it's kind of uncomfortable because it brings back, you know, memories from the news about how she was on life support on a flight. You know, her heart stopped, and she was in a coma before they, you know, shut down life support. And the actress, you know, she passed away. It was sad. You know, we're mortal after all, but you know they had to put that in the movie. So if you're gonna go watch this movie as a tribute to Carrie Fisher, you know, I can understand that, but it's really just a bunch of nothing as a Star Wars film. If you're expecting a Star Wars film, a successor to The Force Awakens, you won't get it. If you're expecting, you know, the next chapter in the ongoing saga, you won't get it. If you're expecting, you know, fan service, you really don't get it. There's a couple of things. There's like a ship comes down, and then you see it's actually a steam iron pressing someone's uniform. There's two rebels, and it looks like they're playing Battleship on their little screens. It's just silly. But for the most part, I mean, Finn says something like, "They don't like that ship." That's so dumb. And Finn gets a girlfriend, but, you know, you thought that he and Rey were going to get together, so, woo, swerve, just like Empire Strikes Back, where you think Luke is going after Leia, and then, just kidding, she's with Han. But it was just done so much better before. If you're going to remake a movie make the remake at least as good, if not better, than the original source material. Or better yet, just do something new. But this was like a half remake of Empire Strikes Back, and then just mixed in some video game references and some expanded universe stuff, and just some unnecessary filler, some swerves that were, unsatisfying, very unsatisfying. I mean, imagine how you felt when Han Solo died in The Force Awakens. Some people said they were sad, or, oh, it felt like he sacrificed himself. It wasn't. It was just silly. I mean, I wonder, is this how Kylo Ren killed the Jedi? He just said, oh, I've got this lightsaber, and I need you to help me with something. I can't do it on my own. Here, come closer, come closer. Reach your hand out. Meow. I killed you. And you fall off it's like if you're a new recruit to Luke's Jedi Order and you see Kylo Ren on the bridge, don't walk up to him. Especially if he asks you to help him with something that he can't do on his own. I mean, how many times did that trick work for him, honestly? That was stupid. But imagine a film filled with moments like that. It's just, if they're going to kill off a well-liked, well-established character, make it memorable, make it good. At least Obi-Wan had a fight before he was killed off in the first movie, and he stayed with us. He came back as a spirit. He was a cool thing, a cool character. And Luke, it's like, oh, I'm going to end the Jedi. Why? At least kill Kylo Ren first. End the Jedi? That's silly. And he severs his connection to the Force just like Kyle Katarn and Dark Forces 2 Jedi... no, actually not Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight in Jedi Outcast, the third game in the series, which is an excellent game, by the way. So, Luke Skywalker is now Kyle Katarn. Just like Kyle Katarn was Luke/Han in that first-person shooter series. Excellent series, by the way. I'd still play that today. Much better experience than watching this movie, to be sure. And it was, it's just a video game budget. So Luke severs his connection to the Force, and he's going to burn down this tree in this island in Ireland where these, fish nuns run the place and build everything out of rocks, and they keep breaking everything. It's silly. And they're these, big, goofy aliens that he milks, and he drinks the milk, and he's like, yeah, it's good stuff. And he, spears a big CGI fish, and I presume eats it. And then those stupid little Furby, penguins with their little sad faces. But it's like, okay, so all the Jedi knowledge, well, he said the original writings of the Jedi from 1,000 generations ago on these leather-bound books, and they're all faded, and they're just sitting there on a shelf in a little cave inside a big tree. And he's going to burn it down with one torch, and then Yoda appears and knocks him on the head and says, okay, fine. He burns the whole thing down with a lightning strike. So really, you're telling me all this time, all that stuff from the prequels just didn't matter? All those records, the Jedi Temple was not destroyed. You can see at the end of Return of the Jedi, the special edition, it's still there. All the archives, the records, we don't know that the Empire destroyed them. So they've got it on these holographic books or computer files or whatever, and we're supposed to believe that they're on just one copy, just like one tiny little bookshelf, like this wide. It's a set of encyclopedias has more information than these books, and those are the original texts of the Jedi, and he thinks that if he burns those, that will end the Jedi Order. How stupid is that? That's like saying, well, you know what? If we go to Washington, D.C., and we destroy that copy of the U.S. Constitution, American democracy will be over forever. So no one, has copies of that anywhere in books or libraries or on computer, on the internet, or someone memorized it. And then, Yoda says, well, don't worry, Rey memorized most of the good stuff anyway. You memorized some of the good stuff anyway, so, right? Well, the other stupid thing is this. Why would destroying the Jedi text do anything? We have Jedi spirits. You could call upon Yoda at any time and say, Yoda, tell me what's in the Jedi archives. And he could just sit there for 20 years and tell you everything that's in there. What, the Jedi spirits don't remember things? Call up Obi-Wan. Yoda doesn't want to talk to me. Obi-Wan, tell me everything. Okay, well, blah, 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 all the stuff we learned in the archives, blah, blah, blah. Darth Vader, Anakin, Tell me everything. Blah, 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 blah. You can just write it all down again, recreate it all from scratch. Why would burning a couple books? That's like saying, if you destroy the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Bible will be gone. Nobody copied the Bible in all that time. There's a million, trillion, whatever copies out there. You could recreate the whole thing from scratch. I mean, they're important artifacts and everything, but destroying like that copy isn't going to do anything. And when Luke dies, the Jedi will be gone, except for Snoke, well, whatever, someone with the Force, and Kylo Ren, and Leia. Leia has the Force too, even though she was never trained, and Rey. So Luke's motivation is it's just silly. It's like he's not thinking. He's an idiot. He's a curmudgeon. He's a senile old man. But that's not the Luke we know. It doesn't make sense, and he just kind of, okay, R2-D2 shows him the old hologram of Leia, and oh, you know what? That was a low blow. I guess I'm just gonna train. So cut out all that silly suspense. This was just to swerve us with the trailers. Oh, Luke, he won't help. He's a cynical old man. He's a failed old man. You're gonna have to talk him into going on one last adventure. I'm getting too old for this stuff. It's just silly. So, you know what? I've ranted enough. The Last Jedi is a bad movie. It's not Ed Wood, quality bad, but it's a disappointment. It relies heavily on all the Star Wars lore, and it doesn't do justice to them. And it drags, and it just does everything poorly. The only thing good about it are the pretty visuals. But, any movie can do that these days. So if you want to buy some action figures of some crappy characters, go right ahead. But I have no interest in that. It's just pointless. So, anyway, that's that. That's my verdict. I don't expect The Last Jedi is going to grow on me. I don't suspect that my expectations for the next Star Wars movie is going to be any higher. If they do another one of these Star Wars story, and it's written and directed by different people, that's fine. But I feel like the higher ups at Disney will just kind of do their best to make as much money as possible. But clearly they don't have the spirit of Star Wars, whatever that was, whatever that spark was that made the movies great. Even the bad Star Wars movies like Episode 1 have greatness in them and potential in them. Disney doesn't have that. They're just a mindless machine. They just chew up bits from the old movies and spit them out again, hoping that something will stick. They really flopped with this one. But the critics are saying, go onto Rotten Tomatoes right now. 93%, 96%, top critics. According to them, aggregate, of course, it's as good as the original Star Wars. 300 reviews, and they're saying it's great. I think those critics are wrong. They wouldn't know a good movie if it, bit them in the face. The fanboys who are saying it's the greatest Star Wars ever, they have no idea what they're talking about. How could they be so blind? So do what must be done. Do not hesitate. Shun this movie. Send a message that you're not a sheep, that you just swallow whatever Disney gives you and tells you is Star Wars. Make your voice heard. If you want to watch it, if you want to torture yourself for 2.5 hours and, give a scathing review as I've done, go for it. But explain why. Don't just be a mindless fanboy or an anti-fanboy. Well, I hate it because everyone likes it. I hate it because it's popular. I hate it because it's new. No. There are better examples of Star Wars. The Force Awakens was better. It was a rip-off, but at least it was entertaining. At least it was fun. At least some of the jokes were funny. This is mostly a failure. Mostly cringeworthy. And on and on and on. And I'm tired, but I think I've said enough. So, skip it. Watch it on video if you're really desperate. If it comes on Netflix or Hulu or whatever, Disney just bought Fox, so who knows? Pretty soon they'll own all media, net neutrality and blah, blah, blah. But, it's almost Christmas. The birth of your Son of God. That's something fun. And if you don't believe in all that stuff, at least, enjoy all the good feelings, the Charlie Brown Christmas that you can have. This movie, if you waited, 2 years for it, and you waited in line to watch it, and you're just disappointed and jaded, you've still got fun things ahead, so just enjoy your life. Don't let Disney tell you, when you can be happy or have fun. So, that's my little message. So, have a good night, and I'll see you in another video. Maybe I'll talk about some wrestling. I think there's some wrestling tonight that I missed, but, WWE Network, I can watch it later. Maybe some other videos, but, masks are nice. I like masks. I like good acting. I like good fight scenes. I like good storytelling. And The Last Jedi just didn't give me that, and it was disappointing, but I'm glad I set my sights low. So Disney, you failed. Rogue One was alright. Like a TV miniseries on the big screen. The Force Awakens is the fan film, and The Last Jedi stinks. So, goodbye.